Hi, everyone. This is America Adapts, the climate change podcast. Hey, Adapters. Welcome back to another exciting episode. Today, we're taking a trip to the Garden State. I recently attended the New Jersey Coastal and Climate Resilience Conference, a groundbreaking event that's the first of its kind for the state. In this episode, we'll dive into some of the incredible discussions and insights from the conference. And just a heads up, some of the interviews were recorded on-site, while others were done post-conference. That might be a little confusing, so I just want to let you know here at the beginning. I also had the honor of being a keynote speaker to kick off the event, which gave me a front row seat to some fantastic conversations with New Jersey's top experts and leaders. In this episode, we'll be exploring the current state of coastal science, climate resilience, coastal management, ecological restoration, and much, much more. All right, to kick off this episode, I'm joined by Nick Agarone, the Chief Resilience Officer for the state of New Jersey. Hey, Adapters, joining me is Nick Agarone, Chief Climate Resilience Officer for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Hi, Nick. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Doug. Happy to be here.
Nick, it's great to have you on. First off, let's ground my listeners on who you are. What do you do there as a Chief Climate Resilience Officer?
As the Chief Resilience Officer for the state of New Jersey, I wear a number of hats, the most important of which is that I coordinate resilience policy with 22 other state agencies and departments on an interagency council that was established by the governor, specifically to ensure that we were working in a collaborative fashion to better the resilience of the state. At the Department of Environmental Protection, I manage the Office of Climate Resilience. We oversee New Jersey's Coastal Management Program. I oversee New Jersey's Blue Acres Program, and we are largely focused on providing our local governments with technical assistance to make more resilient decisions.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you end up as the Chief Resilience Officer?
So I'm a planner by education and experience, and I've been working with the Department of Environmental Protection for about 20 years, primarily working on planning and in various aspects, everything from working on state plan and regional resource protection and the very exciting world of wastewater management. And when Hurricane Sandy impacted New Jersey, back in 2012, I was in the same program as New Jersey's Coastal Management Program. And at the time, we were looking at the issue du jour at the time was public access. And I remember talking to my boss as we had no power for a week that we really needed to change our focus. And ever since then, almost all of my work has been focused on helping our local governments become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. I've been in this position for just over 2 years, and I am the second Chief Resilience Officer for the state of New Jersey.
Before we talk about the conference, I want to ground my listeners in a little bit of the resilience work that you're doing in the state. And we're going to hear a lot from people at the conference, but can you tell us what Resilient New Jersey is?
Sure. Resilient NJ is a local planning technical assistance program, originally funded by the HUD Natural Disaster Resilience Competition. It sought to bring experts to our local governments who don't have the expertise or capacity to really do this work, did a detailed vulnerability and risk assessment, worked with the communities, and I say small c communities here, not just the elected officials, to really identify what the vision for those municipalities, for those communities was, understanding the risks from climate change. And so it looked out at climate impacts through 2070 and through a multi-year robust public engagement process, identified a series of actions for those communities to undertake consistent with that resilient vision.
Let's talk about the conference. I'm headed to New Jersey. I've never actually been in New Jersey except for the airport. But this conference itself, this is the first of its kind, right? It's the first coastal resilience conference that you're hosting there?
Exactly. We had an event back in 2018 where we announced the start of a coastal resilience plan, but were obviously interrupted for a few years. And really in collaboration with a group that we work with regularly, the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative, really wanted to set up this conference to bring together all of the practitioners in New Jersey in one place to bring all of their expertise and knowledge and questions together in one place.
Give me some of the conference themes when people attend, what they're going to encounter there.
Yeah, when people join us, they're going to hear from some great speakers, yourself included, and we have set up a series of tracks, a broad range of tracks to address or to talk through the wide range of issues that we're dealing with in New Jersey. Everything from climate resilience, transportation, to municipal support, to nature-based solutions. There's a very broad group of folks who we're expecting to see at the conference. And we have high hopes that by bringing the diverse groups of folks together in coordination with these multiple diverse tracks, we'll have a real comprehensive discussion and understanding of what the issues are in New Jersey and what the path is forward.
Yes, thanks again for inviting me. You had me as a keynote speaker. I'm very excited to speak to your crew and learn what you guys are up to. All right, Nick, I'm going to bring you back at the end of the episode so we can dig in a bit deeper about what happened there, what's going to happen there, and just get your thoughts on some of the work that you're going to be doing in New Jersey. So I'll see you at the end of the episode.
All right, great. Thanks, Doug.
Hey, adapters. Joining me is Commissioner Sean LaTourette, New Jersey's Commissioner of Environmental Protection. Hi, Commissioner. Welcome to the podcast.
Doug, thanks for having me.
This is my first commissioner, so I appreciate it. I got to meet you in person at the conference, and so we're doing this post-conference, but let's just ground people first. Tell us a bit about the scope of the work there at DEP and your role there.
Sure. In New Jersey, the Commissioner of Environmental Protection is effectively a cabinet secretary, much in our federal government where you have a Secretary of Transportation or a Secretary of Commerce. I'm basically the Secretary of the Environment. And in New Jersey, that includes how we build our resilience to climate change. And so the work that we do crosses all different sectors of our economy, from the water sector to the industrial sector, to every type of building that is put along our coast or along our riverine communities. We set standards to protect people from risks of flooding and help to make sure that folks have access to clean drinking water, that our wastewater systems are resistant to changing conditions from climate change. And our work really covers the gamut.
Every state does their climate and their environmental work a little bit differently. I work for the state of Florida. I work for the Fish and Wildlife Commission, which is basically the state wildlife agency, and DEP was a little bit different. So why is climate adaptation and resilience so important to your department?
It's a great question. Maybe I should give a little context for that. New Jersey is unique in how it structures what I'd call its environmental governance. Unlike Florida, the way that we structure our environmental governance in New Jersey is what I'd call a big umbrella approach to environmental governance. And so in our formulation, that includes things like leading, on an interagency basis, of course, the development of our climate resilience strategy and pursuing reforms and enacting grant programs that help to build resilience to the changing nature of our landscape and our built environment here in the Garden State.
I know this could be its own episode, but something that I kept hearing over and over again was how big a catalyst Hurricane Sandy was. And it's been a little while since Hurricane Sandy, but it's been such a huge catalyst for adaptation planning in New Jersey. Does that seem accurate?
I would say that there are really two natural disaster events that have been major benchmarks for our climate resilience endeavor in the state of New Jersey. And that would include Superstorm Sandy as well as the remnants of Tropical Storm Ida. The conference that we just closed was the Coastal and Climate Resilience Conference in New Jersey, because in many ways, after Superstorm Sandy struck New Jersey in 2012, we began to see our adaptation needs as finite and coastal largely in their application. And Sandy was a benchmark storm in that respect. All of the devastation it caused. Who can forget the pictures of New Jersey boardwalk roller coaster sitting in the ocean, for example?
Right.
But just like Sandy was a benchmark storm from a coastal perspective, Tropical Storm Ida was that benchmark storm from a riverine from a fluvial perspective. And about 17% of New Jersey is in a FEMA-identified flood hazard area. Now, those flood hazard areas we know are growing in their size and the waters in their depth from our impacts of climate change and intense precipitation. In 2021, I think we experienced a bit of a wake-up call from an inland perspective, just like we experienced that wake-up call from a coastal perspective nearly 10 years prior.
A lot of my listeners obviously weren't able to attend this conference, and you gave this spectacular speech. I thought it was just a big pep talk, and it was great hearing a state cabinet person saying these things. Could you just give us really just maybe some highlights to let my listeners know some of the key messages that you want to share with the conference attendees?
Sure. At first, my goal in that setting, as it is in many a setting, is to ground us in fact, in science, as imperfect as that science may be. We don't see in New Jersey our climate science endeavor as something that inevitably just stands still. We know that it is changing, but we've taken considerable efforts under the leadership of Governor Phil Murphy, our current governor, my boss, in New Jersey since 2018, to try to convey our climate reality here in the state in a less abstract way. You can read one horrifying report after another out of the global scientific community, but it can leave you wondering what that means for your experience here in the Garden State. And so we undertook efforts to distill the New Jersey specific experience, put out our first New Jersey specific scientific report on climate change. I began that talk, as I do others, with that reality in mind. That New Jersey has a greater risk of sea level rise than most other places on the planet, 2 times the global average, right? We have seen a continuing increase in extreme precipitation. We have risks to our water supplies from a repeated occurrence of harmful algal blooms that infect our waterways and our reservoirs. New Jersey, while coastal and you don't associate it with wildfire risk, has just in the last year seen over 1,200 wildfires that have burned 18,000 acres in our small state. And so putting those facts front and center and helping folks to make that climate experience more tangible was a primary point of that talk, but not to leave the audience in a state of, I don't know, depression or climate anxiety
Right.
by sharing those facts. I think it's important to talk about the network of solutions to adapt to the realities and the coming worsening of those realities, that we do today, right now, have the power to make different choices. And that if we can summon the political will, if we can hasten the actions of our institutions, right, informed by sound science and a willingness to make hard choices, we can be more ready than we are today. I don't believe we're ready. We weren't ready for Sandy. We weren't ready for Ida. We are more ready today than, the very day before each of those events. But it takes concerted action across every sector of society at every level of government. And I think we're well on our way in New Jersey.
Obviously, communication is a very important issue for me. I've got a podcast here. You guys are doing a lot of things behind the scenes, on the ground implementation, actually doing the work that you just described. How important is doing public communication around climate adaptation resilience to the public in New Jersey? Because sometimes it's an issue. It's hard to articulate to the public, like what you're up to.
No question that it is difficult to communicate what government is up to regularly. That is a communication struggle in every aspect of our work, including in the adaptation and resilience space. I think I have a story that might help convey the point, or at least express where we are at in communicating and what we have more to do in that space. In early part of my tenure as commissioner, we put forth a number of big, what we call deliverables in government speak, these points of science and public communication that identify risk and that begin to analyze the problem and at least explore what some of the solutions are. On both the climate mitigation side, how we reduce our emissions of climate pollutants, and on the adaptation side, how we build greater resilience. Between 2019 and 2022, we put forward what we call the Global Warming Response Act report. We did a lot of public communication, press communication around that real staple document, what I would call a piece of thought leadership for New Jersey. And then we did the same thing with the scientific report on climate change, really making the changing conditions that we face here in the state down to the granular community level for folks to understand. And then we did the same thing by enacting our first climate resilience strategy, real work of problem identification and beginning to get specific about the solutions. Over 3 years, we did all of this work. We communicated with the public, with stakeholder groups. I've done press availability after press availability, explaining the import of these issues. And then come 2022, I go to a big conference where all the local governments in New Jersey get together. And your listeners are all over the place. I will just say very directly, New Jersey has a lot of local government. There are 565 towns, boroughs, municipalities in the state of New Jersey, right? 21 counties. There's a lot of government machinery. And all of that government machinery and its personnel descend on Atlantic City in the middle of November for a big conference at a convention center that covers every aspect of government. And I spoke 3 times on each of the 3 days of this conference. And in every room I went into, I asked people to raise their hands. These are government leaders, right? And government personnel. If they had read the Global Warming Response Act report, if they had read the New Jersey specific climate science report, if they had read the climate change resilience strategy, the number of hands that went up was deeply depressing. And as much as I thought we communicated and over communicated, we did not meet the mark because the people who should know this information didn't. And what I took away from this experience and have tried to practice in the 2 years since is to be really mindful of the rooms I'm in, to be really mindful of the forums that me and my colleagues at the DEP attend, and to guard against what often happens in the climate space, where we talk to ourselves. And we have to do as much communication outside of that bubble of those in the climate space as we possibly can, as exhausting as it is. And so now I've made these points a part of my routine town halls that I do with the public. Every month we go to a different city, we set up a town hall, and I am constantly talking directly to residents about these issues. And I think that matters. But still, there's so much more to be done.
If someone outside of New Jersey was visiting, do you have a favorite natural spot that you'd recommend they go to?
In my role as Environment Commissioner, we're charged with the management of 1 million acres of public land. And there are too many wonderful spots to pick. But I think from an adaptation perspective, there is one place that I'd suggest you go. I would go to the Delaware Bay Shore, right? Which is not what you think of when you hear about the Jersey coast or the Jersey Shore, right? It's this sliver, bottom part of our peninsula, because New Jersey is surrounded by water on 3 sides of the Delaware Bay, where we are experiencing some of the most significant impacts of climate change: rising sea levels, subsidence of land, loss of wetlands.
Fantastic recommendation. It was a pleasure to meet you in person, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
A pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for your work. It's so important.
Hey Adapters, joining me is Terry Doss. Terry is the co-director of Meadowlands Research and Restoration Institute. Hi Terry, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Doug, how are you?
What is the Restoration Institute?
We are the scientific arm for the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority, and our focus is the open space and wetlands and sensitive habitats of the New Jersey Meadowlands.
You are one of the primary organizers for this conference, right?
Yes, I worked with a representative from New Jersey DEP, and I was representing the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative on the effort.
We're going to talk a little bit about that history. But first off, we're here at Monmouth University. Why was this chosen?
It's a central location that's close to the coast, and we have quite a few people from Monmouth that were engaged with the NJCRC as well as with the planning for the conference. And so that made it a lot easier to just slip right in.
It's a beautiful campus. I've been able to walk around a little bit, and the facilities for the conference are top-notch. So it was a great selection. So tell me a bit about your history with the conference as you first got started. What are some of the things that you had to do?
Sure. I'm a member of the New Jersey CRC. And when we started talking about the conference, I jumped right in as a volunteer because I've worked on a number of different conferences, usually for professional societies. And so I was very interested to see where this went since it was the first collaboration between the NJCRC and NJDEP. But as it happened, they needed a co-chair. And because I had some experience, I was asked to step up and work with DEP directly on this. So I was excited for the opportunity because I'm up in North Jersey, and this gave me a chance to work more directly with folks from Central and South Jersey and pull a real diverse group of people together to focus on a common objective, which normally when you're at a conference, you're with a professional society or something like that, where people generally have the same background. But here there's folks from every aspect of the coastal resilience community, from municipalities to educators and students, and from all the different regions of New Jersey. So it was a great opportunity to bring everyone together for the first time and start these discussions.
We're just getting started here. Who can we expect at this conference?
It was interesting to look at who submitted abstracts, as well as who then signed up for the conference. And it was a really great mix of federal, state, and local government officials, a couple of municipalities, a number of the universities and their students, a lot of private engineering and planning consultants. And then we had a good amount of people from the nonprofit world. So really, everyone that's working on these issues of coastal resiliency are involved both from a speaking point as well as they'll be in the audience.
And how did you guys come up with the themes of the conference?
NJCRC's been working with the state since, I would say, 2018 or so, looking at what's needed and specifically what municipalities need to try to face the issues of adaptation under a changing climate. And so the idea was, what are their needs? What are their pains? And who are the experts already working on this that can provide them with more information? And how do we bring all of those people together? And so the themes that came together were, one, engaging with New Jersey experts and leaders on the current state of coastal science and research, as well as climate resilience planning, coastal management, and ecological restoration, and everything around those worlds. But also, more importantly, fostering peer-to-peer learning on what makes for a successful project with a community buy-in. And then last, one of our major goals was to make sure we had a lot of networking opportunities to build these relationships. And I think that's what I'm most looking forward to.
You just took away my next question. What are you most looking forward to? Maybe you can give me one more thing besides the networking opportunities.
I think I'm most looking forward to hearing the different experiences, both from the municipal level. There's a couple of sessions that are focused on what the municipalities have been doing since they've been subjected to storms like Superstorm Sandy. So I'm looking forward to hearing those perspectives because I come from someone with experience in the consulting world as well as in the state government.
Can you share for my listeners, if they happen to be coming to New Jersey, do you have a favorite natural area in the state?
Oh, of course I do. It's the Meadowlands, the New Jersey Meadowlands. And a lot of people know of it because they either drive by, fly over, ride by on a train. And I'm not from New Jersey. And my first impression as I came up the New Jersey Turnpike was that it was all just this open space with oil tanks and landfills. And so I was shocked the first time I saw an area with a lot of trees or these beautiful tidal wetlands. But now that I've been working here for 30 some years, I can say it really is one of the most amazing places in the state in the fact that it's been resilient all on its own. And so our job up here is just to help assist with that resiliency. But also we're 5 miles as the crow flies from New York City, but you can get into some areas where it's just you're surrounded by wildlife and it's quiet and peaceful. And I think although a lot of people know about the Meadowlands, they don't really know the natural part of the Meadowlands.
Fantastic. Terry, I appreciate all your help leading up to this conference, and I'm sure I'm going to see you around a lot as we're wandering around and attending these sessions. I will talk to you later.
Thanks.
Hey, Adapters. Joining me is Tony McDonald. Tony is the director of the Urban Coast Institute at Monmouth University. Hi, Tony. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate being here.
What is the Urban Coast Institute?
We're here at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. We're located just 1 mile from the beach in the Jersey Shore. So our focus is really looking at essentially marine and coastal policies. We really try to get the best science to inform policy questions, whether it's sea level rise and impact on our coastal communities here in New Jersey, or the siting of offshore wind farms off in the mid-Atlantic. So we try to engage science in support of good policy.
Could you just elaborate more about your particular role there?
I'm the director here at the Urban Coast Institute. We've been in existence since 2005. I am a lawyer by training and generally work with our scientists here at Monmouth University, but also other partners as well to engage in some of this coastal policy work.
We're also talking about this New Jersey Coastal Collaborative, and you were one of the founders of that. Can you tell us a bit about that process?
Yeah, one of the things that we do at the Urban Coast Institute is actually we do a lot of convening. We like to bring a lot of partners together around an issue. We recognize it takes a lot of different kinds of people to solve these problems. With support from some other partners, we here at Monmouth and my associate director, Tom Harrington, are the co-directors of the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative. This happened right after Sandy, actually. We recognized we needed to bring non-governmental organizations, other academic institutions, and local community leaders together if we're going to focus on the impacts of storms on the New Jersey coast.
Here we are at this conference that your guys are helping convene. What do you hope this conference accomplishes?
It's an incredibly exciting time in New Jersey right now because the state has stepped up and appointed a chief resilient officer. We, as an external community and the New Jersey Resilience Collaborative, have worked and brought together a lot of the communities that are impacted by those policies. So it's the first time that the communities in the state have gotten together for a summit where we're really bringing all of the different players to the table. So it's really exciting to have 2.5 days of meetings and discussions and also a day of field trips to really see the difference we're making around the state.
I'm curious, doing some homework on you, and you had a previous position where you're executive director of the Coastal States Organization. I'm curious, how did that help you in your current role? Did you learn a lot from that process? How does that kind of fit into the New Jersey focus?
At the time, I was actually representing all the governors of the coastal states in Washington, D.C. So I was always looking to really move, whether it's the federal agency policies or the state level policies in support of issues. I'd worked a lot in that role, working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So I was very familiar with the work that they do in New Jersey around beach nourishment and other activities. I actually worked at that time and represented the states on sort of the IPCC report where we were developing the U.S. government's position on climate change and coastal resilience. So I brought a lot of policy perspectives from the D.C. level back to the state where I grew up and focused a little bit more explicitly on how we can make a difference here in New Jersey.
Without naming any states, I'm sure there was a spectrum on what states were able to do on climate change. You must be happy that you're in a state like New Jersey that's able to really focus on it at the moment.
It does make a big difference because really I think this is an issue in New Jersey, and even in New Jersey, the politics are maybe not as divisive as other places around the country. But I do think the beach and the Jersey Shore and the impacts on communities is really something that brings together folks from both sides of the aisle. It's not just a coastal issue with all of the flooding from the past storms upstate as well. I like to say we should think of New Jersey as a peninsula more than just as sometimes the politics divides it into sort of northern Jersey and southern Jersey. But when it comes to flooding and storms, that's something that unites everybody.
You had mentioned the Institute plays a key role in just convening events. Just to give a little bit more of a description of what you guys do there, you have some events coming up, catalyzing party and community action on ocean, climate, and BBNJ, and you're moderating that. Just give people a sample. What's that all about?
Again, we're involved in a few things here at the Urban Coast Institute, and one of them is looking also at international frameworks. I actually have been, Urban Coast Institute, where I work, is an observer to the climate conference. So we were over in Dubai last year, and increasingly around the world, they're recognizing that the coastal areas are some of the most vulnerable areas. Most of our major cities around the world, not only in the U.S., are located in the coasts. And so we're looking at that, and not only from a perspective of thinking about adaptation and sea level rise, but also things like the ocean might be the solution to climate change. If we can build wind farms in a way that can get us off fossil fuels, that could be a major mitigation of climate. So we're looking at some of those issues. And biodiversity, BBNJ, is a shorthand internationally for really looking at biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So we're looking at the whole suite of issues that are driven by climate, but really are pretty much in evidence here in New Jersey every day.
It's my understanding the turnout for this coastal conference was actually much higher than you guys were anticipating. So how do you see the Urban Coast Institute maximizing what's happening here at this event? What are the things that you're thinking about afterwards?
I think we want to build on it. We really got some reinforcement that some of the programs that we have been running, we have these periodic, what we call coffee chats, where we bring in leading folks from the community, really share with each other best practices. So we got a lot of endorsement of that. So I expect that we'll expand some of that activity. The state is looking at new, perhaps more regulations and thinking about how we really incorporate some of the new commitments by the state, including regulation that you must disclose in real estate impacts, whether or not you've been exposed to floods in the past. But we need to make communities aware of these things and also hopefully prepare them to think more proactively about how they can take actions in their community.
Okay, so we're still at this conference, but any highlights from the conference so far for you?
I think we had really some wonderful keynote speeches and discussions about how we really need to think positively about these changes, not only negatively. So I do think that pretty much in every session we were hearing that there were opportunities for us to address these issues. We heard a lot of focus on maybe thinking about protecting some of our wetlands and some of the nature-based features and not look to just hardening our shorelands. So I think we had a lot of endorsement about looking at some of these more comprehensive natural solutions. And I also think we need to follow up and get more local community leaders involved with our next conference. So we're already talking about having another conference in 2 years and a preparatory conference next year. So everybody said, could you please do this again? And maybe we need to bring some more diverse communities to the table as well. We want to make sure that it's not just thought of as something along the beach communities, but also some of the communities up in North Jersey that might be vulnerable to storms as well.
Do you have a favorite natural area you'd recommend they go visit?
Oh, yeah. I love to go to Sandy Hook Park. I'm up at the thing. I love to be on that incredible beach up there and also look at the Manhattan skyline. It's really a remarkable place to be and really incredible. We have that asset so close to the city and right down the road from most of the communities in New Jersey. And I think it's a hidden gem.
All right, Tony, thanks for coming on the podcast and thanks for all the great work you're doing there at the Institute.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Adapters, joining me is Elizabeth Semple. Liz is the Director of Adaptation for the Nature Conservancy in New Jersey. Hi, Liz. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
First off, before we dig into some of the work that you're doing there, tell us about your roles and responsibilities as Director of Adaptation.
The adaptation program in New Jersey TNC includes both a focus on implementing nature-based solutions in the coast as well as in two key cities in New Jersey, Newark and Paterson.
Let's dig into some of the work that you guys are doing at TNC. So nearly a decade after Superstorm Sandy, what are some of the key lessons that the Nature Conservancy is highlighting against the impact against New Jersey's coast? So this obviously drove a lot of work for a lot of people. I'm assuming the same thing for the Nature Conservancy.
Post Superstorm Sandy, the Nature Conservancy, and I wasn't with them at that time. I was with New Jersey DEP, but TNC started to implement in partnership with DEP, Ducks Unlimited, other partners, the beneficial use of dredged material on marshes to try to help them keep up with sea level rise and make them healthier. They did 3 projects and they now are complete and have been monitored. And our focus in our coastal program, our coastal adaptation program, is still very targeted on the beneficial use of dredged material to have marshes be more, and the adjacent ecosystems be more resilient to climate change and be able to adjust to sea level rise.
We have accelerated sea level rise, and it's my understanding too, New Jersey's getting it more so than other parts of the country, and there's these extreme weather events. How are existing shoreline protection systems falling short in protecting communities, and do nature-based solutions offer a path forward?
Nature-based solutions offer a path forward to adjust to some or become more resilient to some climate impact. Nature's going to do what nature's going to do. And because we have built so heavily on our coast and our shorelines throughout the state, it's very difficult to just use nature to adjust to huge increase in storm events and the real threat of sea level rise. But nature-based solutions can play a key role in reducing the impacts and reducing the nuisance flooding or the increase in storm surge that comes from the coastal storms. So it's not going to be a panacea, particularly because marshes don't have the room to migrate in New Jersey because there's development and the parkway and obstacles. But if those marshes are in place, they do reduce the destruction that occurs to communities.
It's very interesting for me. I come from Florida and I've looked at some coastal projects. You think of nature-based solutions to adaptation and like protecting mangroves. And I went to Mexico and they have some pretty extensive mangrove systems. So a lot of nature-based solutions, it's just protecting the existing mangrove forest. But when I was in New Jersey, can you describe to us, and I think you've done a bit of that, is just like when you see such, there's a term for it, that there's human influence management of the coastal systems. How do you slot in nature-based solutions? What do those really look like?
Nature-based solutions in the coast are living shorelines. They're also creating bay islands or recreating bay islands in our bays of waterways to reduce the wave energy that are hitting our communities and our community shoreline. One of the key problems with the marsh systems is that they are losing sediment. It's eroding along the shoreline, and that sediment is going into the channels. The channels are then dredged so people can maintain the boat channels and be able to use their boats. So that sediment's going out of the system, and those marshes are losing forever that material that keeps them in place and that allows them to provide a buffer like a sponge in front of a community that can absorb water and that slows that water down. If you think about water running across a hardwood floor versus water running across a rug, like that has a lot of fiber that can absorb water and slow it down.
Let's just hop into, you'd mentioned cities. I wasn't necessarily specifically going to ask about a city, but obviously you have something to share there. What did you have in mind?
Our TNC climate adaptation program also focuses on Paterson and Newark, as I mentioned previously. TNC is focused on these two cities because Newark has one of the largest heat island effects in the country as a community. So over the past year or so, we've implemented or planted 200 trees in Newark. And we've secured $8 million from the U.S. Forest Service to plant another 2,000 trees and to help build capacity for the city and the local environmental groups and communities leaders to maintain those trees and keep them in place. Up until this point, the city has been losing trees and not keeping them maintained and in place. So this is a huge effort that TNC and other partners have taken upon ourselves to work with the community to try to reduce the heat island effect, improve the air quality. And we're also using these innovative planting devices that would also absorb rainwater and clean that and slow it down. So it can be multi-purposed, these trees.
When you were at the conference, who are some of the partners you work with? And were you surprised to see the different types of people that showed up to the conference? Were you surprised by some of the participants and potential partners for you to work with?
No, I worked for New Jersey DEP for a long time, over 30 years. So a lot of the people, and I was in and managed and a leader in the coastal management program for a long time. So a lot of these same leaders are the same people that have been working in this field or their organizations for a long time. The American Litter Society, the Army Corps, the Ducks Unlimited, the New Jersey Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. A lot of these same players have been working in this field for a long time.
If someone was visiting New Jersey, do you have a favorite natural area that you could recommend to them?
St. Michael's Preserve in Hopewell, it's near Hopewell Borough. It's used to be a Catholic orphanage, and it is now part of the DNR Greenway. It's just a magnificent place. You go there in the evening, and you can see these amazing sunsets.
Fantastic. Liz, I appreciate the work that you're doing there in New Jersey, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, Adapters. Joining me is Dr. Nick Brown. Hi, Nick. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Doug. It's been great meeting you this week and chatting with you at the conference, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm meeting all sorts of very interesting people. I'm glad to have you on. But first, let's ground people. Where do you work?
I am a coastal scientist at HDR. We are a consulting firm, and I am based in the New York, New Jersey area.
You actually have a bit of experience in Florida, though?
Yeah, so my PhD, where I worked on coastal processes, was based out of Florida Atlantic University, where I worked with Dr. Tiffany Roberts-Briggs, and I spent 4 years in the Boca Raton area.
Much different environment. Great. They got you up here in New Jersey. So it seems obvious, but HDR, it's a private firm. Why are you here at this conference?
HDR is a huge firm that reaches into all aspects of architecture and engineering design and all kinds of get into the nitty gritty of all the engineering. But we also have a pretty large coastal group, and working at this conference here, it's the New Jersey Coastal and Climate Conference. And as a coastal scientist in New Jersey, this is a perfect place for me to come and meet with the DEP folks that came, many other government agency folks such as Fish and Wildlife. We have some Army Corps folks here, and then also engage with other practitioners and the academics that are here to understand where the research is at, where the needs are at, and where we need to be going in the future.
Were there any surprises? Obviously, a lot of these folks, but it must be nice that this is clustering people in your orbit and you just get to meet new folks.
I think the biggest surprise, as I've chatted with a few folks here, is that this is really seeming like the first time that all of us are in the same room at the same time. Because we've had plenty of half-day or one-day workshops where there's a bunch of us there, or maybe 20 or 30 of us. But having 200 people in the room that all do the same thing in New Jersey is really special. And the biggest surprise is kind of everyone who's actually working on this. It's not, you're not alone working in this space. There's a huge group of people, and the collaboration that has come from all of us being together and working on it has been great over the past few days.
You were able to do this presentation there, and I like the title. It's called Coastal Tourism and Coastal Resilience, a Blossoming Relationship. Fun title. What was that all about?
The fun is really the aspect that I was going for. It was supposed to be fun, engaging, and actually have a discussion afterwards. The majority of this work in the presentation comes from James Houston, who works at the Army Corps of Engineers, and he is a coastal economist who has spent a lot of time talking about how federal dollars pay for beach nourishment or other practices and the value that we gain from them. In this session that we had, we only had 3 speakers, which normally you go, oh, shoot, we have too much time left over. But that last half an hour that wasn't filled by a speaker, we actually filled with an open discussion. So we got to have a roundtable after we talked about coastal tourism, the tax dollars that it generates, the need for adaptation. And we hear all the time the price tag of adaptation, the price tag to create more resilient marshes, beaches, etc. And we talked about new ideas of how we could fund these, how we could take care of some of these issues, whether it's through state revolving funds, whether it be through other more competitive grants, or just any other ideas that folks had. So it really was supposed to be a conversation starter and get folks actually moving and thinking, and less me lecturing at you and more, what if we did this cool thing?
A big part of the presentation was about the value of beaches for tourism. And obviously, if you're doing beach restoration, you're doing it because there's an economic impact of that. How do you guys think longer term? I get the short term approaches. All right, you're doing beach renourishment, there's storms and such. But when you think about sea level rise, 3 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet, this is going to impact tourism. Are you guys thinking that far ahead?
So that definitely is a thought going ahead. And that's when you think of non-structural solutions is what they're often called. And those end up being bulkhead ordinances where you have bulkheads on the backside of those islands or on the front side have to be X height to protect the property during these storm events, during these extreme wave events that we end up having. But with coastal tourism, a lot of the thought of possibly migration or strategic realignment or whatever the terminology you want to use for the old phrase of manage retreat is something that the coastal practitioners have in our back pocket as a tool. And it's something that we're ultimately going to be looking toward for some of these locations. But in other ones, the tourism is what sustains them and what keeps them going. And we have to still cater to that today because as I talked about in the presentation, and I used a quote from a 2003 article, they said, if there's no beach, they'll go elsewhere to go to the beach, meaning they need to go somewhere, or we as Americans and international tourists that come to the U.S. to visit beaches want and need to go somewhere for our beach vacation. And if there isn't a beach there, if you don't take care of it or you don't restore it, people will simply go elsewhere.
I'm not sure if it came up, but with other groups, World Wildlife Fund, this is an important issue for them, is the idea of sand mining and beach renourishment. There's actually a limit of how much sand that you can pull out of the oceans. Is this coming up for you guys?
So this is a great topic, and it hits some of those areas back in Florida where they have limited sand supplies and their offshore resources. But up here in New Jersey, we have so many inlets that have a truly insane amount of sand when you think about the quantity that we want to put on the beach versus what's actually in the inlet systems. So a lot of that dredging or the dredging projects actually take sediment out of those inlet systems, which all of that sand in the inlet, for the most part, comes right off the beach as the sediment grains go tumbling down the beach with longshore sediment transport. So here in New Jersey, we don't have that huge crunch for sediment, but there are plenty of places in the United States that have that crunch. And that's an issue that's being solved or at least discussed, often heated in discussions.
Oh, like oil, we could be into sand mining in the future and they'll be coming to New Jersey and you can make a big fortune off it. You never know what's going to come up with adaptation planning. I don't want you to go off on that tangent, though, but just a couple more questions. Give me some highlights from the conference.
From the conference, as I said, having all the folks in one room was really special. Getting presentations from all of the folks that we normally get in separate occasions and actually getting them together, it sparked new conversations, whether it was through the Army Corps chatting with more of the DEP folks and getting those guys, in the same conversation at the same time, or bringing those municipalities into the same conversation that the Army Corps is in, because everyone always feels a disconnect. So being able to actually connect, as I mentioned before, I think that was my biggest takeaway in PERC. The second wonderful thing that I had was in my session, that discussion that we had about tourism and the discussion that we had about taking funds off of tax dollars or creating a new state revolving fund or something crazy like that, as some people might label. But hearing other folks' thoughts and conversations afterwards was really inspiring and important to me, because we often go and give talks at these events and I talk for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes and then just walk away. I might have 2 or 3 side conversations, but the format of having all 20 people in the room in a round table, and none of those people were an invited guest. Nobody was solicited to be there. It's just folks that had an interest in this. So they might actually have something to add to the conversation. And to my surprise, it was way more productive than I thought it would be. We ended up sitting there for about 30 minutes, and then we had to leave to go to the final closing session.
Last question. What's your favorite natural area in New Jersey?
Oh, my favorite natural area in New Jersey. That's got to be the E.B. Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge. I know that's a kind of cover-all answer for New Jersey because it spans from basically Atlantic City all the way up to Brick Township. But my favorite area is the Wildlife Drive that we have here in the Galloway Township area, and then it extends over to Brigantine Beach. And all of that natural area that they have is just so beautiful. And I'm a huge migratory bird guy, so I love watching all the birds that come through the Atlantic Flyway.
All right, Nick, thanks for coming on the podcast and for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's been wonderful meeting you, and best of luck.
Hey, Adapters. Joining me is Natalie Augusto-Filion. Natalie is the Deputy Chief Climate Resilience Officer for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Hi, Natalie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Doug. Thanks so much for having me.
I already talked to Nick. I have you on. But first, let's ground my listeners. What do you do there?
The main part of my job is supporting interagency work. So New Jersey has an interagency council on climate resilience that's made up of 22 New Jersey executive branch departments and agencies. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of effort that goes straight into just making sure we're all pulling in the same direction around our climate change resilience strategy for the state.
This topic is increasingly getting a lot of focus, which is a good thing. So can you tell me about the Extreme Heat Resilience Action Plan and a little bit of history? How did that come to be?
So this body, the Interagency Council, sometimes I'll say the IAC for short, but we came together through an executive order from Governor Phil Murphy in 2019. And there were a few things that happened under that executive order: the creation of a Chief Resilience Officer position, which is my boss, Nick, the establishment of the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience, a mandate to develop a scientific report that sort of brought together all of our knowledge about climate impacts in the state of New Jersey into one place, as well as the development of a climate change resilience strategy. And so that unfolded all of those various sort of mandates and creations of new bodies and the new position, et cetera, over the course of a couple of years, which coincided with the pandemic, as you can imagine, just in terms of timelining here. And so when we first developed the climate change resilience strategy, the strategy is our foundational policy framework for advancing resilience in New Jersey. There was quite a lot of attention paid to matters of flooding of all different kinds. There's a coastal resilience plan that's sort of embedded into that strategy, but relatively little treatment of extreme heat as a hazard of concern, as a threat to New Jersey. And it turns out we're the sixth fastest warming state in the country. Our temperature records show that while the global average has warmed 1.5 to 2 degrees, New Jersey's warmed by 3.5 degrees in the same exact period of time. So it was clearly something that was valuable to consider and to bring the agencies together in developing another statewide action plan.
Can you give me some specific examples, and not just your agency, maybe other state agencies that they're helping to protect New Jerseyans, and I think that's a word, from extreme heat events? What are some specific examples?
Yeah, to first start by saying that it's an extreme heat resilience action plan that's looking at things like heat waves, but it's also considering the sort of slow stressor that is the warming that is taking place in New Jersey, right? So it's not just those heat waves happening more often, happening for longer periods of time, but it's also that slow rise in temperatures in our water bodies that may be causing water quality issues. So this report, this plan has 130 actions in it. They're organized into 20 sort of thematic groupings that really cut across the landscape of ways to engage with the topic of extreme heat. So there's a focus area on cooling centers. There's a focus area on housing issues, on energy infrastructure, on drinking water, on ecosystems. So I won't rattle them all off for you, but it's a really broad sort of swath of types of interventions. And there are a couple where there are a number actually that are collaborative in nature, right? Where, for example, the Department of Environmental Protection is collaborating with the Board of Public Utilities, which is the sort of entity that serves as regulator of all utilities in New Jersey: telephone, cable, electricity, natural gas, et cetera, in order to advance efforts that help local folks do better resilience planning activities, particularly in urban heat islands, particularly in communities that have a large number of disadvantaged communities who might struggle to pay their electricity bills and therefore maybe not choose to turn on life-saving air conditioning during very hot events.
I'm going to do a big pivot here, but this has come up a bunch at the conference, and this is the Blue Acre program. But just in regards to your responsibilities and your program there, tell me a bit about the Blue Acre program.
Yeah, so the Office of Climate Resilience is made up of 3-4 different sort of programmatic teams, I should say, that have some name brand recognition. Blue Acres being one of our sort of longest standing programs, as well as an entire sort of project team. In addition to that, there's the work that we support for the Interagency Council and some resilience planning work where we provide funding and technical assistance to communities that are looking to better understand what a future climate is like and how they can best prepare. Speaking specifically about Blue Acres, it's our voluntary buyout program. Any home that was substantially damaged after a storm those folks had the opportunity to engage with the state in using federal and state funds to purchase or elevate their homes.
Can you tell us just really briefly some of the points that you made in your plenary session at the conference?
Yeah. So I was one of the speakers in the final plenary session, which was really reacting to the conference as a whole. As I think you may have experienced, there was this pent up energy to come together because the last time we had a convening like this was before the pandemic. So there's just this sort of hunger for folks to come together. And for me, one of the most sort of compelling elements of the way it was structured was the diversity of folks in the audience. So the fact that there was so many different areas of subject matter expertise and approaches to advancing climate resilience, I think is really unique. Often we'll have folks come together who are floodplain managers or who are emergency coordinators or who are public health officials or what have you, and they're not necessarily all coming into one place to talk about resilience and climate resilience and coastal issues together. So that is part of at least what I found compelling. I named the fact that there was diversity in the subject matter expertise. One of the things that I called out in my remarks in that session was the importance of recognizing that this work needs to go beyond the traditional look and feel of an environmental stakeholder, which is generally white, generally older, generally wealthier and affluent when we're talking about sort of statistics for this field. And I myself am an immigrant. I come from a low-income background. I'm a woman of color. And making sure that those perspectives are part of the decision-making table and part of the way that New Jersey approaches programming in a way that really reflects New Jerseyans as a population. That was something that I spoke about. I also had an opportunity to summarize some of the tidbits that we heard the day before there had been a session that I helped to organize, although I wasn't on the panel, for the Interagency Council to basically listen, to take advantage of this really stellar audience of folks with deep knowledge and expertise of climate resilience in New Jersey and ask them, what should state agencies be doing to advance this work, this sort of collective work that we have to make New Jersey more resilient? And so part of my panel remarks were synthesizing what we heard from the audience and sharing that back with folks that maybe weren't part of that panel, didn't have a chance to walk around the room and look at the post-it notes, etc.
I have a lot of younger listeners in college age that are really interested in getting to the adaptation space. They reach out to me. They're looking because there's not a lot of programs out there that give you degrees in adaptation. So in your office, what kind of people are you looking for?
Yeah, this question could not be more perfectly timed because we actually advertise an internship opportunity supporting climate resilience policy. Okay, we received 148 application submissions to this internship opportunity, and I'm looking for some degree of understanding of how government approaches this work. And honestly, a lot of this is things that you learn on the job. And so college students who are entering the job market should do whatever they can to have applied coursework experience, opportunities to do studio classes, ateliers where you have a client and you're working for that client to advance sort of a purpose of applied climate resilience and adaptation practice. So that would definitely put someone towards the top of my sort of list. Also really good communicators. So much of this work is explaining context in a way that recognizes audience. When I am engaging with my transportation agencies, I have a sense for what's motivating them, what's driving them, what levers are at their control. And I'm ensuring that I'm recognizing that context in approaching folks about opportunities for partnership or collaboration. The same is true for our housing folks. The same is true for our Department of Health and our Department of Human Services. Government is often siloed. And so part of being able to cut through those silos to show the opportunity for resilience across many different areas or sectors is being able to stitch together that story.
Could you tell me your favorite natural area in New Jersey? Let's say someone's visiting. What would you recommend?
Ooh, this is a great question. I love that. So I have an 8-year-old and I live in Essex County, and the Essex County Park System has an area called South Mountain Reservation that has a trail where local volunteers literally display little fairies and fairy homes. And so as a parent, it's a really fun way to engage my young child in enjoying spending time outdoors in all different kinds of weather, because there's always something interesting to find. So the fairy tale at South Mountain Reservation in Essex County.
Fantastic. That was a unique one. There's been some repetition, even though people have favorite spots. So that's great. All right, Natalie, it's been fantastic having you on. Thanks for the work that you're doing in New Jersey, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Doug. Appreciate you and the work that you do.
Hey, adapters, I'm back and I'm with
A.R. Siders.
What do you do?
I'm a professor at the University of Delaware, where I direct the Climate Change Hub, and I work on public policy and climate change adaptation.
I know what Siders does because she's been on the podcast before. We did an episode on managed retreat, but it's been a while, so I wanted her to reintroduce herself. So why are you here at this conference?
I was invited to give a talk that tries to think about some of the big picture issues around adaptation, where we're heading next, where we need some new innovation. And I'm also doing work in New Jersey, so this is a great place to come and talk about some of the work we're doing in New Jersey, looking at specifically building in floodplains and the buyout program.
I didn't know a lot about New Jersey, and they are actually doing quite a bit. What's your sense of things? And you obviously track these things nationally and to a certain extent. How's New Jersey doing?
Like most of the United States, New Jersey is doing a lot and also not doing nearly enough. And I think that's true everywhere. New Jersey is taking a lot of action, and I think they are more proactive than some states because they're having some of the tough conversations, and they recognize that there are tough conversations to be had around this. On the one hand, they're doing some really innovative things. They're announcing a heat resilience plan here, which is really exciting. Blue Acres, of course, has done some innovative things on the relocation front, but also it's not enough. It's not enough to deal with the challenges that they have. And at some point, there's going to have to be a discussion about how New Jersey thinks more ambitiously about adaptation in the long term.
You've been really involved with these managed retreat conferences that are hosted by Columbia, I think, at every time. Has New Jersey been thinking about managed retreat at all?
So New Jersey has an unusual state-run buyout program. So that's their main way of thinking about managed retreat. And I think they're actually having some challenges right now where they've been doing buyouts and doing some managed retreat. And now they're hitting a point where they have to make a decision about how serious they're going to be about managed retreat. How much are they going to say, okay, we bought out the worst of the homes and now we're done and we're just going to try to adapt in place? Or to what extent are they going to say, we could really redesign the state and redesign where things are at for the long run? And that's a politically difficult conversation to have. It's not surprising that's not an easy answer.
What are some of the sessions that you're hoping to attend?
I'm interested in some of the professional development sessions, actually, about how they're building capacity with local planners, because a lot of this action happens at the local level. And we always hear about how local planners, local officials are overwhelmed, right? They have a lot of day-to-day things to deal with, as well as trying to think about big existential problems like climate change. So I'm interested to see what kind of tips and tricks they have for those conversations. Interested in the conference having conversations about climate change communication, because that's such a huge component of how we build political will for these bigger, more ambitious climate change actions.
I'm based in Arizona. It's a very big state, and I come here into the mid-Atlantic and New England, and I'm always curious, okay, New Jersey's doing some good things, but New York is right next door, Pennsylvania's right next door. What's your academic sense of how the states are doing as a whole region?
New York is also doing some innovative things. They're thinking about a state-level buyout program. I don't know if it'll look like Blue Acres here in New Jersey, but I'm sure that they're looking at it as an example of how to build out. Again, the answer is the region is doing good things, but really has to be way more ambitious for the long term.
You have quite a few graduate students. Could you tell us, not maybe all of them, but some of the things that they're up to? Because I think that represents what a professor's doing in their lab.
Yeah. So we have students all over the place right now. So some students are looking at legal issues of land use and how towns are trying to prevent development in floodplains. So why we shouldn't put homes in places that we know they're going to flood. Other students are looking at how government officials make decisions, particularly ethical decisions, and how they think about trade-offs where you can't have your cake and eat it too. What do you choose when push comes to shove? Students are doing all kinds of things, from surveys to interviews to reading planning documents to looking at laws to doing on-the-ground GIS mapping, all kinds of different things from a day-to-day basis in the lab, in quotes.
Okay, Siders, you're not actually from New Jersey, so I can't ask you the question about what's your favorite natural spot in the state. So I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite Bruce Springsteen song?
Born to Run, yeah. Yeah, it's got to be Born to Run.
Okay, Siders, always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much.
Hey, adapters, joining me is Dr. Thomas Harriton. Thomas is the Associate Director of the Urban Coast Institute. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Here we are at the conference, but first off, let's ground some people here. What is the Urban Coast Institute?
The Urban Coast Institute is a science-based public policy institute. We look to take the best available science and think about how that can inform current or future regulations or policies that help advance resilience and adaptation in New Jersey.
You're part of this collaborative, this resilience collaborative that's organizing the conference?
Yes, I'm actually a facilitator, one of the facilitators of the collaborative, which is basically a community of practice of resilience practitioners, adaptation practitioners, academics, NGOs, and communities all working together to try to advance adaptation to climate so that we are more resilient to the impacts that future climate may have on our communities.
Okay, so speaking of facilitation, tell us a bit about your role here at the conference and give us some your own thoughts about how that's unfolded. You're there in the main room facilitating, but just tell us what you were brought in for.
We work completely on a volunteer basis, but we do have a little bit of funding support through NOAA to gather the partners together a couple times a year for meetings. And now this is brand new to us to actually host a conference here at Monmouth University, which brings everybody together into one room to really discuss what we're doing, what we're learning, what we may want to do in the future as it relates to kind of climate proofing our coastal zone here in New Jersey. So specifically here at the meeting, because I'm a Monmouth employee, somewhat of all the technology and room setups and making sure the speakers are lined up correctly falls to me and my crew. So I'm lucky to have some really great students and colleagues helping me. But really, it's the operations of the conference that I'm mostly engaged with.
You're up there, so give us some highlights for you, just from some of the speakers and such and panels.
Yeah, the highlights were really, to me, the real highlight was how many people are engaged in the work. That was surprising. I think when we started this process, I expected 50 abstracts to be submitted. We got way over 100. And the desire to really get this right, to understand, one, that what we're doing is relevant and important and timely. And the other is that time is running out. We're not acting fast enough. And I think that came through in the panels, especially the plenary panels at the beginning and end of each day that tried to give a little bit of fire under us to make sure this work proceeds in a way that really helps communities sooner than later, because we know sea levels are rising and accelerating. We know heavier precipitation events are coming, and we need to be ready. And I think many of the speakers pointed out, hey, we're not moving fast enough, and we need to be thoughtful about this.
You actually participated in a couple breakout sessions too, where you were speaking in those?
Yes. Yeah. So part of my work here at the Urban Coast Institute is to work directly with our communities on really implementing resilience action. So we've partnered with a number of different of our collaborative members to pursue funding. So we have some National Fish and Wildlife Foundation funding to work in communities to plan and design adaptation projects. And it's a long process. Again, that timeline I get nervous about because these projects are typically funded in phases, but we work collaboratively together to identify solutions and then look for money to implement them. And so we had a couple of sessions focused on that here at the conference. And it was great. It's a great opportunity to highlight our colleagues, very disparate partners that do very different things that are all out there working together to make these projects happen.
Any standout moments or things that really resonate with you on the field trips that we took?
The field trips that we took, I think the range of solutions we looked at, we went from what I would call a very grassroots NGO project, which is trying to work with a community to develop a natural shoreline solution to sea level rise and storm impacts along a river. And some of the things they had to work out to get that done. I think one of the interesting things to me at that project site was that the view of the homeowners across the street was very important. So keeping project heights within a limit so that wouldn't be affected was important to getting the project implemented, which kind of shows you how there's a give and take in these design projects. Then we went and saw massive Army Corps of Engineer projects, which sometimes to me seem very out of place in the natural environment, but they have a little bit of a different design. They're designed to protect communities against these 1 in 100-year events that can be very damaging. So I think we got a good feel of scale of solutions and what they look like. So I hope what the participants took away was, what do you want your shoreline to look like? And what solution is best for your community? I think that was the intent of that field trip.
So attending the various sessions and just meeting different people, is there anything that you learned that you're going to take back to your work at the Urban Coast Institute?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more opportunities for partnerships. I think that was one of the real values of coming to the meeting. It was one of the first meetings since the pandemic where we had a large number of people that had time to network with each other, to talk with each other, really learn about what they were doing. And then there were some organizations and people at the meeting that I met for the first time and didn't really understand what they did. And I think those kind of opportunities to connect and advance the work is really important. And that's something I'll take away.
For those visiting New Jersey, do you have a favorite natural area or just a favorite park or something in the state?
So I'm a little biased. I grew up along the coast in South Jersey. I'm an advocate for the wide openness and natural landscapes of the southern part of New Jersey, which if people are familiar, they might think New Jersey is all about, you drive down the turnpike, industry, airport, suburbia. But there is a large part of New Jersey which is very natural and looks like time has not changed. And the marshlands along the Delaware Bay and some of the portions of the barrier islands that haven't been developed that are state parks are beautiful. And that's my favorite spot to go to, especially on a calm summer evening around sunset. It's just an unbelievable landscape that I wish more people could see and not think of New Jersey as this industrial complex.
That would be a good thing. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I was very impressed with everything that I saw my first time in New Jersey. Well, Thomas, it was a pleasure meeting you and working with you at this conference, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it was our pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much.
Hey, Adapters. Joining me is Laura Kerr. Laura is a senior research coastal engineer at Stevens Institute of Technology and a coastal resilience specialist at New Jersey Sea Grant Consortium. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Doug. Great to be here.
Let's just ground my listeners a bit here. So you have those two roles. Can you give us some background what that means? What do you do with both of them? And I'm sure there's just overlap with both of them.
Yeah, there is some overlap. They're also very divergent hats. My primary role as a senior research engineer in our coastal engineering department at Stevens is very much more on the science and engineering end of coastal work. We have a field program where we do collect a lot of field data, monitoring how beaches change, why beaches are changing, different coastal processes. So that's everywhere from mapping beaches or measuring waves and currents at different sites throughout the state. We also do a lot of living shorelines work, which is more on the Back Bay, monitoring performance, either evaluating sites for their upcoming application of living shorelines or monitoring the performance of living shorelines and how we can make that technology better. And on the other hand, the coastal resilience specialist is more working with municipalities and trying to provide them with technical assistance. Through that is how I became engaged with the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative, the NJCRC, and became a co-facilitator of that organization.
Tell me a bit about the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative. What's the intent?
Intent of the collaborative is really to be a community of practice where all the different entities working towards New Jersey coastal resilience can come together and exchange ideas. The collaborative itself is made up of more than 75 partners across the state, everything ranging from nonprofits, for-profits, universities, advocacy groups, planning groups, and all levels of government. So everything from federal down through municipalities. And they're all, we say our shared mission is fostering sustainable and resilient coastal communities and ecosystems by generating informed action. Basically, the idea is we bring everybody together and brainstorm on how we can help move the needle forward in the state of New Jersey in becoming more resilient to all the changes that are facing our communities.
Obviously, this conference is a chance for the folks that are partners in this collaborative to come together, but you have a sort of a loose planning process. Is it a quarterly thing? How do you even manage those groups that come together?
Great question. So as a collaborative, we come together as a whole twice a year. That's our full partnership meetings. Then our leadership come together quarterly, 4 times a year, every 3 months, to think about as a whole, where do we want to go? But the real work of our collaborative happens in our work groups, and our work groups are generated by the ideas of our partners. So a partner may say, I want to look at streamlining the regulatory process for ecological restoration in the state of New Jersey. And then the leadership will say, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We think you should do that. And then our work group lead will bring together all the partners that they think should be working on that topic. It could be people that are partners that are already part of the collaborative, but they're also allowed to bring in people from outside the partnership. Basically, bringing together the best minds to tackle their issue that they think that they want to address. So our work groups all work independently. They might meet monthly or more or less frequently. And that's really where all the real magic is happening in our collaborative. They're the ones that are doing the brunt of the real work, moving specific issues forward. Our conference really is highlighting a lot of those work groups, showcasing their work, but also helping them to bring in outside perspectives so that they can better understand how they can better do the work that they're trying to.
You might have a different answer than, let's say, the overall collaborative, but just I want to ground my listeners. What are some of the most pressing issues? And then looking at what are the opportunities in coastal engineering and resilience in New Jersey? If people just wanted to quickly understand what some of these big issues are.
Honestly, the number one issue is always money for everybody from every level, every perspective. Is there's just not enough money, whether it's money for doing the research on our end. We always at Stevens, want to better understand the science, create better models, be able to provide that better technical assistance, having the best science and knowledge. Municipalities and the state want to build better infrastructure or improve their infrastructure. So they're always looking for money for how they can plan and implement projects, I would say. Money is definitely a big share concern. I think another thing that's coming out of this conference is the need for a bigger, broader vision of where we're headed. We don't really know where we're going to be in 2100, and needing to start envision that is a big concern.
Okay, you're there at the Stevens Institute, and I've been increasingly covering the issue of climate modeling, which you had just mentioned. A lot of local governments, a lot of small groups that need to use these things as they do adaptation planning. It's not easy to figure these things out, and there's a lot of private firms coming online, but actually a lot of universities and federal agencies have created some of these modeling tools, but they don't necessarily, the groups that want to use them for like on the ground applications, they don't know really how to interact with them or how to use them. Are you encountering that? Like the whole notion of climate model just seems increasingly important for people to actually make some decisions, right?
Absolutely. At Stevens, we, at least from where my group is engaged and is really on flood modeling. So we have the Stevens Flood Advisory System, and it provides really pretty accurate flood forecasts for the New York Bight region, closer to New York, better than maybe Cape May, New Jersey. And we're always looking to, and not so great on the back bays. We're working to improve those models. And that's obviously one important piece, is having the best model, because you don't want people relying on your model that may not be giving the best answers, right? We feel like we are very confident in our models in certain areas. And now another big push, in addition to improving the model in other areas, is making that model more useful to our municipality. So it is an area that we're looking to expand, at least our particular research, is how do we not just say at these 40 sites across New Jersey and New York, you can expect flooding, but now provide maps to a municipality and say, this is where we anticipate you're going to have that flooding, where it's going to be the worst in your particular municipality. It's a challenge. There's a lot of resources that go into that. You need to take the results seriously, as a lot of resources and lives are depending on those information.
You have the collaborative, and there's a lot of those partners, and they like to come together, and I'm sure this conference is a big part of that. But any surprises for you on the people that are participating, some of the attendees, and do you see these are potential future partners for the collaborative?
100% see these as future partners. That is definitely as one of my goals as co-facilitator of the NJCRC, is to keep growing the collaborative. I think we were just, as a whole, I can honestly say that we were pleasantly surprised and excited by what we received. And really the conference is probably twice as big as what we anticipated it was going to be when we first set out on this about 6-8 months ago. And it's just been really exciting. We've heard so much positive feedback, like people from Maryland talking to their coworkers in New Jersey and being like, hey, how did you get into that conference? We heard it was sold out. Really just exciting. We fully believe that to have the best resilience approaches, we are going to need to have all the different perspectives at the table. So being able to bring all these great minds together really helps to feel more confident that we're moving we're going to be moving in the right direction.
Fantastic. Last question. If someone's visiting New Jersey, if you could recommend your favorite natural area for them to go to, what would it be?
I would definitely have to say Sandy Hook. It's one of the few undeveloped areas in New Jersey that's on our coast. You can be on the Atlantic side, or you can be on the Bay side. Great biking and hiking trails or walking trails throughout the park, and great kayaking opportunities on the Bay side. And it's always just amazing to me from this pristine perspective that you can still see New York City off to one side and cargo ships coming through. Just really, for me, highlights the importance of our area, but also how beautiful it could still also be.
Fantastic recommendation. Laura, it was a pleasure meeting you. You were so helpful to me at the conference, and thanks for appearing on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Doug. We're so glad to have you join us.
Hey, Adapters. I'm back, and I'm with
John Miller.
Okay, so what do you do?
I'm a research professor of coastal engineering.
And where do you do that at?
Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Tell us some of the research and some of the work that you're doing.
Well, we do research on coastal storms, flooding, beach community resilience.
Why are you here at this conference?
To learn about all the great work that's being done in New Jersey, see how we can contribute as an academic institution, a lot of opportunities for research, learn how to do things better, just try to interact with the folks on the ground actually doing the work, find out what their needs are so we can try to meet those.
Not every state has a resilience plan, but New Jersey does. What's your sense of it? How are they doing?
I think that's been one of the most amazing changes since Sandy that we've had in the state. The state has taken things much more, I would say, seriously. They've developed a plan. They're forward thinking, which has not always been the case. New Jersey sort of has been the butt of a lot of jokes historically. So it's nice to see that we're being more progressive and thinking towards the future.
What are some of the things that your students work on?
Students are working on a number of projects. We do a lot of beach erosion, dune impacts, so coastal storms, breaching of dunes, and how that might impact communities from a coastal flooding standpoint. We also do a lot of work with living shorelines, nature-based systems. Our group has pioneered that approach within the state of New Jersey.
Obviously, this is an area that was impacted by Hurricane Sandy a while ago, but it's still driving a lot of resilience planning in the state. Is it something that came on your plate? Are you still dealing with it? Because there's a lot of funding that is still coming out from that, right?
Yeah, the funding is there to do and to improve things. I was fortunate enough to be on the ground. We do flood forecasting at Stevens. So prior to the storm, was involved with media outlets trying to help the public understand the dangers of what was coming. I was on the ground afterwards, touring through communities that were just absolutely devastated by Sandy. Some of the most amazing, depressing things that I've ever seen. And we're working right now to try to help the state do things better. So there was an initial build back, build it the same way. And our philosophy is, why don't we try to do things a little bit better? So through our research, understanding how we can build better beaches and dunes, build them more resilient, how we can help communities understand their risk, how to make operational decisions, emergency management decisions. Those are the types of things that we're currently working on.
Not a lot of my listeners experienced something like that. Can you tell us just firsthand, where were you? What were you doing? And did you have a sense that it was going to have such a huge impact?
So I was actually in Minnesota, of all places, a day before the storm, and got back just in time. Didn't think it would be necessarily nearly as bad as it turned out to be. Did the routine things, got gas for the generator, that kind of stuff. Then I was on the phone talking with media outlets, trying to explain the storm surge warnings that we were providing to the state and the communities. And then the storm hit and the power went out. And like everybody else, I was struggling and trying to balance how to communicate with people through cell phones and cell networks, and how to help my family and keep the generator running, keep ourselves going. And then I was on the ground afterwards, walking through communities with representatives from FEMA, looking at the damage to places like Ortley Beach that just got obliterated by the storm. And I'll never forget being there and walking through what used to be a community. And I looked on the ground and there was a Christmas stocking. And here it is. It's like October or November. And I'm thinking, this Christmas is going to be so different. This person's house is gone. And that's the moment where it touched me that a storm is personal. It's not just, you see it on TV, it's buildings, it's okay, it's somewhere else. But that to me was the point where it really hit home that these storms are impacting people. And that kind of highlighted the importance of the work that I do. And it's made me think more seriously about it every day that I do it.
Okay, we're here at this conference. What do you think so far?
I think it's great. I think it's a great opportunity to celebrate the successes that we've had since Sandy and how things have gotten better. At the same time, it's an opportunity to learn about where we still need to get better. There's been a lot of great talks about a lot of research that's being conducted, a lot of work that the different agencies are doing, some of which, even though I live in the state, I work in the state, I was unaware of. But it also highlights the opportunities that we have to continue to learn how to do things better, how to communicate actually better between ourselves. There's a lot of people here that I'm meeting for the first time that I should know because of our work is so interrelated. So it's the relationships, it's the understanding of where we've come from, what we still need to do that has been extremely valuable, I think. And I'm looking forward to the fact that the plan is to have this become a routine event. And I think it's important because you need to have that personal interaction. I think Zoom conferences and all that kind of stuff, it's great, but there's no substitute for actually being in a room with somebody, sitting with them, talking with them, understanding what their needs are and how you can help.
This is exciting for me. I'm interviewing a fellow podcaster. Tell my listeners the name of the podcast, what you cover, how they can find it.
Sure. We do the Going Coastal podcast. Going Coastal is a podcast created for students and new professionals in the coastal space. So it can be coastal engineers, coastal planners, coastal managers, coastal scientists. We try to cover all aspects of early career development, everything from highlighting the research that our students are doing in the universities to providing information about how to succeed in the industry, providing a glimpse at different aspects. So what do different jobs involve? The coastal, everybody that does coastal that I know is just really enjoys their careers, but it's a place that I don't think a lot of people realize they can make a career in. So it's about highlighting the awareness of the careers and then just how do you succeed in those careers. And we're on 36 or so episodes. The podcast is available on all the podcasting services, wherever you get your podcast from. And I have two co-hosts who are amazing. They are actually students and new professionals, so I'm a little bit older, but I think between the three of us, we have a balance of perspectives. We have an international student that co-hosts with us. We have someone who works for the Corps of Engineers. So we have a good mix. I think we bring good information to people and hopefully get more people interested in coastal and resilience and adaptation. And that's our goal.
Okay. Do you have a favorite natural area spot here in New Jersey?
Favorite natural area spot? There's a lot of hidden gems along the New Jersey coast. Everybody sees maybe pictures of the boardwalks and the more developed areas of the state, but I've always grown up going to Cape May. Cape May has certainly a nice community, a nice town, but there are some natural areas between the town itself and the lighthouse that I really enjoy visiting. I also just enjoy visiting spots that are maybe more hidden, that people are less popular. There's some great beaches and dunes in Avalon. Island Beach State Park is great.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Hey Adapters, joining me is Nora Morton. Nora is a junior at Horace Greeley High School. Hi Nora, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Nora Morton, and I'm a research mentee as well as a high school student for the New Jersey Bay Islands Initiative in Long Beach Island, New Jersey.
I have you on because you came to this resilience conference, and we're going to focus on that. You gave a presentation there. Can you give me the title? What was the presentation all about?
My presentation was about my research project. I'm in my school's research program, so my project was called Wilson. It's a funny acronym, actually. The acronym stands for Wave Intensity Logging Sensor of NORA, but my main presentation was about the creation of a cost-effective wave action device utilizing smartphone technology. So I was able to engineer a wave action device using an iPod and a waterproof apparatus that could accurately measure boat wakes and ambient wave data.
Let's dig more into that. What inspired you to do this particular experiment?
Well, specifically, I've been staying down the Jersey Shore my whole life since I was born. My mom grew up there, and I care really deeply about the area. And I also got involved with my school's research program, and I wanted to get involved with the problems down there. I also wanted to know what my impact was as a boater because I drive a boat down there when I spend my summers there. But I also wanted to know what kind of with me taking my boat out or things like that. And also I wanted to just learn more about the environment that I care so much about. So I met with my mentor for the first time, and he was like, how about we just stick an iPhone inside of a volleyball and see what it picks up? So that gave us kind of the idea of Wilson from Castaway, like the little volleyball from that movie.
Oh.
So that gave us the original name for it. And then we ended up creating a funny acronym for it. And then I was able to go from there with engineering. It didn't end up turning into a volleyball with an iPhone, but that was just the start.
Okay, to help my listeners visualize though, so that this thing is just out in the water and it's doing what?
So imagine take a waterproof jug that you would put, I don't know, cereal or milk or something in. It has a big, wide screw top lid. And I had an Apple iPod. I put it inside of a waterproof phone case. And then I put it inside of the jug, filled up the jug with some rags and things like that so that the iPod wouldn't rattle around and everything inside. Attached that to a rope and an anchor. So the anchor kept the device in place during deployments, and the rope allowed it to bob up and down with the tide or with waves. So essentially, I made a wave buoy out of low-cost materials and hardware. And then with that iPod, I downloaded this app that isolates different parameters from your device's hardware. For example, your step counter is an accelerometer, which measures units of meters over second squared. So it'll measure those little movements like your steps or other GPS type movements for you. But this specific app isolates those things and you can record them for long periods of time. So that's how I got my raw data from the device.
What were your conclusions? What did you ultimately figure out?
First, I started off with my control testing. So I wanted to make sure that the iPod could actually measure stuff accurately with the app that I used as well. So I set up an at-home pulley system where I created artificial wave heights. So I just lifted the iPod half a meter a bunch of times, a quarter meter a bunch of times, and a full meter a bunch of times. And then I ran those recordings through my MATLAB model. It took the acceleration data from the iPod and converted it to distance. So after I ran it through that, it gave me a bunch of measures that I had, which were pretty accurate. And then I ran a percent error test on that to see if my device could actually measure those kinds of artificial wave movements. And I was able to get percent error values all under 10%. And then I wanted to test it in the field off of a marsh island in Beach Haven, New Jersey. I put the device outside, let it bob up and down during 3-4 hours a day. I got over 10 hours of boat wakes from that data. And I had a GoPro set up as well, so I could look for those boat wakes in my data. And I was able to measure boat wakes from that. So I proved that my device could measure wave movements accurately. And then I also collected a bunch of wake data, which I have already used and been able to generate wave heights from. So it was deployed in High Bar Harbor, on the northern strip of South Jersey. And then from that data, I ran a root mean square error test, which basically told me how close were my values to theirs. I was able to observe the fact that not only could my device measure movements accurately, it could collect boat wakes, and it could also compare to a professional device that is over $3,000.
The immediate results, you did this because you were concerned about boat waves, but there you were at a coastal resilience conference focusing on climate change. Was it your idea to present there? Did they recruit you? What's the story there?
I was with the Bay Islands Initiative, which is a great group of people that are all focused on New Jersey Bay Islands and Bay Islands all over the coast. So they created the BURP, they call it, which is basically a resource that will track Bay Islands. And they connected with me because I'm their research mentee, but they thought it was a great idea to bring me along because they wanted to represent the future ideas of the initiative since I am a student. And they've helped me along the way with my project and made it so much easier for me to get connected with other universities and other different industries and things like that, make connections in the field. So they brought me along, and I've been working with them essentially all summer and in the fall as well. So they contacted me. They were like, we're going to this conference. I think it would be great for you to speak. I was like, yes, that would be amazing. So that was a great opportunity. I got to travel around the day with them and hang out with them essentially during the whole conference that when I was there. And they also helped me network, because since I am a high school student, it was amazing to meet other people in the field and other opportunities for internships and that stuff like that, where I can apply myself more.
So obviously the original intent was this boat wave action, but there you are at the conference and you got to spend the day there meeting people, probably seeing presentations. Did you immediately see the link with the potential impacts of climate change and sea level rise, or did you learn that as the day went on?
For all of my preliminary research before I actually started testing my device, I had to learn all about what really does climate change have to do with Bay Islands and also deteriorating estuaries along the coast. And as a research student, you have to learn how to read a journal article. And I was able to find a bunch of papers saying that essentially a lot of erosion on coasts is driven by sea level rise and climate changes and wind changes, and is also exacerbated by boat wakes and human activity. So I already knew that before I got to the conference, and I also was able to highlight that in my presentation. But learning from not only my mentors, but also the other people at the conference, the other talks that I was able to attend, that I was able to learn that it's not just a human issue. It's a global issue. It's not just a coastal issue. It's an issue all over the East Coast, West Coast. Every nation in the world that's on the water has these kinds of issues with sea level rise and climate change. Being able to hear all these different perspectives and issues was really great to hear. And since my area of interest is very precise, it's very small, but there are so many wide applications, which I was able to apply a little bit in my presentation, but also being able to attend the conference and hear so many different perspectives was really eye-opening to me.
So this is a new emerging field, climate adaptation, climate resilience. Do you see a potential future for yourself in it?
I think I do. Spending time with the Bay Islands Initiative with my mentors and staying in New Jersey my whole life, I've grown a real passion for it, and I would love to pursue it in the future. And I've also been able to gain a bunch of connections with a bunch of different initiatives, universities, really helpful people who have helped me along the way, but also told me about their experience with working in the field. And that's really a place that I see myself in. As a student, I love talking to people and going to these kinds of things. And the conference was not only an eye-opening experience for me educationally, but also making me feel like this was a place and a direction that I wanted to go.
Fantastic. I'm sure the conference organizers love hearing that. Okay, last question for you. For my listeners, if you could recommend one natural area for them to visit if they came to New Jersey, what's your favorite spot?
I'm a Beach Haven girl. I love staying in Beach Haven, but I spent a lot of my time growing up in Toms River, so a little north. But I gotta say, if you have time, paddle around Beach Haven, paddle around carefully around the Marsh Islands. Don't create a big boat wake while you're going around exploring. But Toms River is beautiful. I've been kayaking over there with my family since I was little. And if you can find a little place to put your kayak in and explore the lagoons and things like that, it's amazing.
Fantastic. Nora, I am very encouraged that people like you are out there doing these things. And I think the future is bright in the climate adaptation space if more people like you are expressing an interest in it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, Adapters, I'm back and I'm with
Monica Serrano.
So where do you work?
I work at Turner Construction.
What do you do there at Turner Construction?
At Turner, I lead a resilience program, which focuses on increasing the resilience of our sites and our operations and the buildings our clients are building.
Monica, we know each other. You've been on the podcast several times, I think. You've done a couple episodes, and we're not going to get into that, but I just want to acknowledge that I know you participating in what we do at America Adapts, but why are you here at this conference?
I'm here. So first of all, I live in New Jersey. And even though my position is a national level position, I am very interested in the progress of resilience in the state I live in.
What stood out at this conference for you so far?
I've been surprised in a good way about all the different tools and programs that New Jersey has created and implemented in our state at the coastal level, at a municipal level, and all the efforts that are upcoming. Things that I've learned that there's a heat mitigation strategy coming out in the next year or so. And also just have met really cool people that are in the resilience space here and beyond.
We've had some side conversations. One of the things that we talked about were metrics. So at Turner Construction, how do you guys measure progress in resilience, your focus area?
So there are a couple of ways we measure progress. At a job site level, which are really our assets, our construction sites, we measure progress via a tool called the Job Site Resilience Assessment, which is essentially assessing the hazards that are going to affect the job site and then implementing mitigation strategies. So we keep track of how many projects implement the Job Site Resilience Assessment. When it comes to the buildings that we build for our clients, we're starting to track how many conversations we have with clients regarding resilience. So it's about looking at climate hazard data. It's about understanding our clients' goals around resilience. And then we also keep track of how many resilience features are in the buildings that we build for our clients.
Are you going to bring back anything you've learned here to your day job?
Yes, I already shared some of the lessons from a climate communication session yesterday. Communicating climate change and communicating all the cool things that are happening in the resilience space is as important as the tools that we create and as important as the things that we implement, so that we can share lessons learned and then just keep challenging us to implement resilience.
So I've gone to a lot of adaptation events over my career, and I'm actually quite impressed by how many people from the private sector are attending this event here in New Jersey. I think a lot of them are wising up to their role in adaptation. Obviously, you work for a private firm. Do you have that sense from your own experiences going to conferences? Do you feel like the people from the private sector are showing up more?
I think so, yes, because we are realizing that it's going to take all entities. It's going to take public entities, private entities in a different granular level. So it will take individuals incorporating adaptation as well as townships and counties and states, and also hopefully at a national level.
So we saw Dr. A.R. Siders give a presentation today. She's fantastic, great presenter, really a call to action on a lot of adaptation. Anything stood out you remembered in her presentation?
Yes, I thought it was a great talk. I liked her emphasis on the fact that we have to use a different lens, right? When we look at, we have to change the way we look at things. We also have to utilize creativity, because essentially with small changes, we're not going to be able to adapt to climate change as much as we'll need to. So in order to thrive.
I think I'm going to steal that from her. I did really enjoy seeing that creativity. I did my own presentation here, and I talked about it, but just in different ways. But the use of the word of creativity, there's innovation, but creativity, I really like that. Really resonated with me. And we both use Star Trek, Boldly Go Where No One Has Gone Before. So I thought we were on the same page there, and we did coordinate on our presentations.
Yes, your presentation was awesome too. And one recommendation I would give the conference would be these sessions could have been recorded, because I don't think that they were recorded. And your talk was great. A.R. Siders' talk was great. There are a lot of takeaways from both.
Okay, I have you. You have your own new media in adaptation. Tell us about that.
Yes, I am a podcaster. My co-host Jessica Meterson and I just started a new podcast called Adapt, Climate Change in the Built Environment, available on all podcast platforms. And so we are interviewing folks in the adaptation sector specifically to the built environment. How can we build for that future climate and adapt so that everybody can thrive in the future? So listen to us, subscribe, and let us know if you like it or not.
All right, I'll have links in my show notes for this episode. Thank you, Monica. It's always great seeing you in person.
It was great to see you in person, too.
Hey, Adapters, returning to this episode is Commissioner Sean LaTourette, New Jersey's Commissioner of Environmental Protection. And so before we get started, I just want to mention that you're coming back on. You have some really good news as I was going through post-production of this episode, and I wanted you to come back on and share that. There's a couple things, but I guess maybe we just start off with the real regulations. What are those all about?
Sure. So New Jersey has set about a long endeavor to create what we've called the Resilient Environments and Landscapes Rule, or REAL, because climate change is real. And this is a large rulemaking that takes New Jersey's environmental land use regime and brings it into the future by integrating sea level rise considerations and the expansion of our coastal flood hazard areas as a function of our changing climate.
How does this have application? Because these regulations come out, and so is this going to be like with local governments? Or is it go down to like groups that are working on land use plans and such? How does that all work?
So New Jersey has a unique statutory scheme called the Flood Hazard Area Control Act that sets building standards for development in floodplains, building standards that are stronger than those required under the National Flood Insurance Program administered by FEMA, for example. And in New Jersey, after these rules are adopted, the coastal flood hazard elevation will change consistent with our sea level rise projections. So in New Jersey, using a downscaling of reliable climate models, we believe that folks in New Jersey should plan, prepare, and build with the expectation of potential 2 feet of sea level rise by 2050 and 5 by 2100. And so because we are building things now that we expect are going to be here in the next 75 years, our rules will integrate the expectation of 5 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. And that means development in our coastal zone will have to be constructed 5 feet higher for residential dwellings. Commercial dwellings can be treated differently under our regulations, but we believe this is necessary because of the conditions that we already experience. For example, just recently we were hit with significant storms as this hurricane or tropical storm Debbie rolls through the nation. And in some places, we saw considerable floodwaters visited all along our coast. We need to help our communities to be prepared for that. And that's what these real rules will do.
For me, that's very exciting when you codify these kind of things, because a lot of states are just doing planning. And that's great. You got to start somewhere. But you guys are at that next level where you're codifying things. So you have some other good news, right?
Absolutely. Because of the incredible resilience work that's been going on in New Jersey for several years, some of which was explored and expanded during our Coastal and Climate Resilience Conference earlier this year. Because of all of that work that has gone in, that hard, often unsexy, often thankless work of planning, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration awarded New Jersey one of its top awards coming out of the Biden-Harris administration's implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, where NOAA put out nearly $500 million of awards for climate resilience, and New Jersey received nearly $73 million for projects all throughout our coastal zone.
Okay, Commissioner, I'm very happy I was able to get you back on and give that update. It really fits in well with the overall theme of the episode. Thank you so much for coming on and the work that you do.
It's a pleasure, sir. Thank you for the work you do.
Hey, Adapters, we're back, and I'm wrapping up this episode with Nick Angron, the Chief Climate Resilience Officer, who you heard at the very beginning of the episode. Hey, Nick, welcome back.
Thanks, Doug. It's been a great 3 days.
Okay, we're going to dig into some of the details of the conference, but just 30,000 foot view, how did you feel the conference went?
I really thought it was a great event. We've heard nothing but positive feedback so far. We had over 280 people there, which really made for a great event.
I want to thank you for bringing me, and it was fantastic for me. You guys put on a class act there, and it was just such a diverse group of folks. And so definitely feel honored to participate that, and I'm happy to be sharing the story with you guys. So let's dig in a little bit into some of those details. So the commissioner was on this episode, and he also was one of the keynote speakers that you had. And I just want to say how impressed I was with his remarks, and I just want to get your kind of thoughts. It seemed like this full-throated support for what you guys are trying to do with the conference.
Yeah, it was great to have the commissioner there, and he's really a dynamic speaker, and he's fully behind the goals and vision of not just the conference, but of resilience in the state of New Jersey. We're, I think, fair to say, national leaders in some regards in incorporating climate projections into our regulatory programs and doing comprehensive planning with our local governments.
Nick, you shared with me a while ago, and I want to bring this up at this point in the conversation, and then I'm just going to be quoting here. You mentioned, how do we protect what we have where we have it, to how do we make transformational change in our communities? What did you mean by that?
I think as many communities struggle with is dealing with their day-to-day responsibilities. And right when they experience some type of event, whether it's a national declared disaster or it's just one of those events where your streets flood and your community is impacted, they have trouble thinking about how to respond to that. And a lot of our first responses are very much concerned about the emergency itself and how do we respond to that emergency. And then the easy answers are, we always seem to go to the structural response. And I think we need to think bigger and think longer term about that. We had a couple flooding events up in the northern part of the state in the last few months, very urbanized, densely developed area. And a lot of the conversation was around, okay, we need to dredge our rivers and we need to desnag our rivers. And that's fine. Those are legitimate short-term responses. But I want to have a conversation about how we think about bigger solutions. And that's going to be some structural solutions, but it's also perhaps going to mean that we need to restore our floodplains and perhaps move people out of the floodplains and densify in other areas and do center-based walkable communities that are not in our vulnerable areas. And that's a in our urban Northeast. It's a similar conversation throughout our coastal area, where over 12 years ago now, Hurricane Sandy had devastating impacts, and we've certainly adapted and become a little bit more resilient, but I think we're still not prepared for the significant impacts that we're going to see from sea level rise and potential future storms. And so, again, how do we think bigger? How do we think differently? How do we think outside the box? What is transformational resilience? How do we envision our communities in 2100 or beyond to make sure that our communities are safe, our local economies and our state economy are still strong, and we still have a robust, active community while being more resilient to the coming impacts of climate change?
One of the things I thought was really interesting in all the people that I talked to, maybe not everybody, but there seemed to be just a direct line from so much of the work that's happening today to Hurricane Sandy. Would you agree? It just seems like this huge catalyst for just so much going on in the state of New Jersey.
It was. There was work going on before then. Not only the influx of federal funds, but it certainly got everybody's attention. And I think it was fair to say that for a good number of the people at the conference this week, it was where our resilience story started. And so that's where most of my work or my involvement in this space started. And it's continued. We've had other significant events. That was a very coastal event. 2 years ago, we had the remnants of Tropical Storm Ida come through. It was a much different inland precipitation flooding event. We had the 1,000-year storm in some parts of New Jersey. And it's shifted the conversation and shifted the perspective on how we're working. But absolutely, I think Sandy was where the conversation and not just New Jersey, but I think perhaps even nationally, a lot of the conversation around climate change and resilience and adaptation really shifted.
In this episode, I asked everyone highlights from the conference. And for you, I want to be very specific, though. Can you just give me some of your takeaways from A.R. Sider's presentation?
She was great, from challenging some of the assumptions in New Jersey to challenging us to think differently to challenging us to write haikus. It was a great and energizing lunch speech on the second day that, again, everybody who I've spoken to about it after the fact came away from that energized and ready to think differently about their work. And Doug, lest we forget, after the commissioner's opening remarks, you gave the keynote speech, which I think was an amazing way to kick off the event, really focused us on what we would be doing and talking about for the week, and prioritized communications about climate resilience and adaptation. Even the slides and the talking points that you presented to us in that keynote were talked about throughout the event. There were references back to multiple such statements throughout, and I think it was really a great start to the conference.
Yeah, and thanks again for inviting me. And one theme that I even heard, and you brought up, and I thought did a great example. I had, what's your adaptation story? And I thought you gave a great example. So that was fun to hear after the fact. So the goal is to have this conference hopefully every other year. Any early thoughts on what you might cover, what you might do differently if you have this conference 2 years from now?
Yeah, so we do want this to happen every other year. And kind of the conversation that we've already been having is, one, we think we can make it a little bit bigger and better. There were a number of people who we were not able to accommodate, and there were a significant number of abstracts that we just didn't have space for. Some of the things that we've been talking about is, even before the second year of this, is some interim events, perhaps some things that focus on kind of very technical issues, some things that are very topically focused. And again, we really want to continue the conversation about transformational resilience and perhaps bring together folks to figure out a way to do that with our communities.
Were there any particular sectors that you'd be like, okay, we'd love to have more of them or even any of them at the next event? Did any come to mind?
There was a great comment in our closing plenary by Caleb Stratton, who's the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Hoboken, who is also their Assistant Business Administrator, right? And brought up the idea that the administrators, the clerks, the people who are actually running those local governments really need to understand what the issues that we're dealing with, need to understand the basics and begin to envision opportunities for where resilience and adaptation can be rolled into every decision that our local governments are making. Personally, I'd also like to see some of our state elected officials there. I think that one would be inspired by all of the amazing work of all of our partners and the speakers and attendees. And I think it would help them understand the importance of their importance to how they can take action to assist the practitioners really make a difference in the state.
Any takeaways for you as Chief Resilience Officer that you'll take back to your day job, like something really new that you're going to want to do?
So I think the challenge that I took away is that there is a community of practice in New Jersey that is ready and raring to go here. And we've got to figure out how to take advantage of that energy, how to direct that energy. And I'm taking that back to our interagency council, which across 22 state agencies and departments of state government, to try and think through how we would better engage that community and incorporate them into the decision making at state government.
I've been asking this question to everyone. Do you have a favorite natural area spot in New Jersey?
I am a huge fan of Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook is technically a national park, but it is one of the few areas where you can be on the beach, on the ocean, and have a very kind of natural surroundings, while at the same time, right across the water, you have the Manhattan skyline. It's really quite an amazing spot.
Okay, Nick, thanks again for inviting me. It was just an honor to be there in New Jersey and seeing what you guys are doing. And I'm just looking forward to sharing your story to an international audience. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Doug. We were thrilled to have you. Come back anytime.
Okay, adapters, that is a wrap. Thanks to everyone who participated. As you heard from Commissioner LaTourette, the state of New Jersey isn't slowing down on adapting to climate change. That's very exciting. They are codifying those sea level rise regulations. That's fantastic. It takes adaptation out of planning into actual regulations that will influence how the state develops for years to come, something that is desperately needed for coastal zones. Don't forget to check out my show notes for links to the experts in this episode and to reports and other resources they shared. I'm very encouraged by what New Jersey is doing, and I hope they don't stop. As you heard over and over, there was so much energy at this event, and people were surprised by the diversity and the number of folks who participated. Their next one is sure to be much bigger. I met a ton of people, and I really enjoyed giving the keynote presentation. Quite a few people reached out to me after the presentation and shared their own adaptation story. I love that. And if you're visiting New Jersey, you've got a ton of recommendations for natural places to go. Definitely visit these great places. And don't forget to reach out to these experts if you want to learn more. And thanks to Nick for asking me to participate, and to Monmouth University and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for partnering with me on this episode. And if Jersey's favorite son is listening, Bruce, they are doing you proud, adapting to climate change. Okay, adapters, keep up the great work. I'll see you next time.